The costumes are over the top and the tunes are catchy. The Hunter Valley Theatre Company has put the musical Venetian Twins together after a 2-year break from the stage. It's a sign that financial troubles are behind them, according to executive producer Ray Scanlon.
The Hunter Valley Theatre Company at the moment is entering the 90s and the new millennium, and I guess it binds the company's past with its future.
The Venetian Twins by Nick Enright tells the story of 2 boys separated at birth who are reunited later in their early 20s. The mostly local cast bring the story to life through music and dance in Newcastle Civic Theatre. The show opens tomorrow night. If you're a man and like romantic dinners, one of these girls could be for you. They spent the day trying to find Mr. Right.
You can find people that only want one-night stands and things like that, but I'm not into that. I want a genuine guy.
So the prospective beaux lined up. Some were culled from the outset, while others just wanted a look. But it was this young man from Swansea who had better luck. But it's not quite that simple.
Can we just ask you a few quick questions?
Yeah.
Well, how old are you?
No, 23.
23.
They got the idea from a Sydney woman who received 500 calls from interested men after sitting all day in the window of a bridal shop.
I wouldn't say desperate, no. It's just fun.
At last count, the girls had tallied more than 100 prospective husbands, and the phone was still running hot. Vanessa Spark, NBN News.
On one side of the table were BHP executives, union leaders on the other. At stake, BHP's future for steelmaking in Newcastle. Despite unions pleading for BHP to make its position clear, by the end of the meeting, BHP was still being non-committal.
Our major obligation is to ensure that not only for the Newcastle region but for the state and for Australia, that whatever investment we make it for the long-term future, and we make it so that we're internationally competitive.
But there's been one concession granted to unions. BHP has shown a willingness to share all information regarding its future in Newcastle with the unions and with the state government.
I am pleased to say that the company has given commitments to ongoing dialogue with the unions in Newcastle particularly, so that when decisions are made, we don't read about them in the media, but we are properly consulted.
Mr McNeely has indicated BHP is pressing for a manufacturer of the $380 million electric arc furnace, with a decision to come by the middle of next year. Premier Carr still believes BHP owes a huge debt to Newcastle.
There are all sorts of obligations, economic as well as social, that should predispose the company towards a recommitment to Newcastle, its workforce and its community.
Owners have also been warned about operating their businesses as nightclubs without licences. Police say they're not being wowsers, they just want local pubs and clubs to encourage sensible drinking.
Responsible serving practice.
The month-long undercover operation shedding some light on a city after dark.
People in serious.
Natalie is one of 250 people with a disability who's starting a life in her own home. It's part of the push to include people with psychiatric disabilities in the wider community. Hunter Health and the Department of Housing has guidelines to help make the transition easier.
The department's role there will be to facilitate and to make easier the return of those people into housing.
The report sets down eligibility rules and ways of maintaining public housing for people with a disability. Dr Tim Smythe of Hunter Health says the joint venture will ensure better care.
It's making it clear to everybody who has what responsibility, and in particular I think it'll provide a greater focus on the particular housing needs of people with a psychiatric disability.
Newcastle is the busiest coal port in the world, and the Newcastle Ports Corporation wants to enhance its reputation. The corporation has engaged a consultancy to conduct a $40,000 study to maximise the port's potential. The study will ensure the corporation's land is utilised effectively to provide a strong asset base.
We've got to make sure that whatever land that we do have is kept, for port-related or wharf-related developments.
Future growth for the port could include more marine engineering facilities and at ADI's operations at Carrington. Opportunities also exist in increasing cargo shipping into the port.
We need to diversify, and we'll be pushing even harder into the general cargo areas and leading towards some unitised cargoes and perhaps even containerisation.
Meanwhile, the Port Corporation has reacted coolly to a speech by Federal Transport Minister John Sharp over alleged rorting by members of the Maritime Union in Newcastle. The corporation says the minister is raking over old coals.
We are working very, very closely within our new enterprise bargaining agreement to ensure that the right sort of productivity will be in the port from now into the future.
Blake Doyle, NBN News. Last ABL season wasn't a good one for the Eagles. The wooden spoon and a move to Maitland didn't prove popular with their supporters. But things are looking up with a move to Marathon Stadium and the arrival this week of 4 American imports. The Eagles face a big hurdle this weekend, travelling south for a hit-out with season favourites, the Melbourne Monarchs.
You've got to play them all over the period of the season. Early in the season maybe they haven't quite hit their straps, and hopefully we have a little bit.
The American connection has been hard at training since their arrival on Tuesday. Coach Barclay says they're impressed with the Eagles' home diamond.
I know when the Americans arrived, I don't know what they were expecting, but when they walked on a marathon on Tuesday, they were really impressed.
And after last season's dismal performance, the Eagles are determined to finish higher up the ladder.
We'll be aiming for the top 4 from the start of the season. We'll see how things progress, but basically, if we can be competitive every game we step on the park, we'll be very happy.
The Eagles' first home game will be on November the 1st.
In early January, 21-year-old Stephen Whelan was random breath tested after drinking with friends at Terrigal. A P-plate driver with a reading of 0.1, the Crown believed his sentence should have been harsher. His first hearing at Gosford Local Court in January was adjourned after he volunteered to attend a traffic offenders program. When Stephen reappeared on April 20, he was given a 2-year good behaviour bond and no conviction was recorded. In the Gosford District Court today, the Crown appealed against the lower court decision, claiming it was inadequate for the charge. The judge's ruling on the appeal was that Stephen Whelan be fined $100 and be disqualified from driving for 3 months. The judge said that while he accepted Stephen was remorseful and probably wouldn't re-offend, the alcohol level was too high to ignore.
Well, it's a decision of the court and I accept it, and so does Stephen. But there's a clear message there. The judge was keen to impart a message to young people out there in the community: don't drink and drive.
Sarah Griffiths, NBN News.
The Edgeworth robbery is the fourth within a week. Two men armed with shortened firearms burst into the Newcastle Permanent Building Society at the Oasis Shopping Centre, held staff at gunpoint and fled with an unknown sum of money. However, they were confronted by a security guard from the nearby Commonwealth Bank who'd been told two people were acting suspiciously. Witnesses told of the confrontation.
He was pushed in the throat with the barrel end of the shotgun, or what type of gun it was, I don't know, and hit over the head at the second one was the hit over the head.
The thieves left the shopping centre while witnesses tended to the injured guard.
The guard sort of staggered and he said, "I'm all right," because I said to him, I said, "Oh, you're all right?" He said, "Yes, I'm all right," but then he started to bleed and I had to try and stop the bleeding with the hand.
A building society employee and the security guard were taken to John Hunter Hospital for observation. A white Kingswood station wagon driven by the bandits was later found at Glendale. A second car found on the F3 freeway is also believed to have been used. Police are appealing for witnesses to come forward with information. Blake Doyle, NBN News.
The food remains the same, but the techniques keep changing. Nutritionalist Sally James says it's all about substituting old favourites with new alternatives.
If you might have had butter in a recipe, sauteed in butter, now I've used olive oil, for example, which is a much better fat to be using.
Sally has compiled a cookbook for the Heart Foundation, taking into account busy lifestyles and the temptation of takeaways.
That we're eating a lot more takeaway foods, and people are just not having time to cook. Then they're putting cooking in the too hard basket.
There's more than 200 health-conscious recipes which are quick to make, including some old favourites.
And there's still shepherd's pie, there's pavlova, there's chicken pot pie, there's all the things that we've, even a roast dinner, but just with a few little changes made them very appealing.
Vanessa Spark, NBN News.
Breakers training last night was the last chance for a couple of players to prove their fitness to coach John Cosmina. The two main concerns, striker David Lowe and back Shane Price. Neither came through the session, and today the side to tackle the strikers was announced. Glenn Moore comes in at the expense of Price, who has an injured ankle, while Harry James replaces the skipper up front.
I think Harry, when he came on last week, caused a few problems for West Adelaide's defence, so hopefully he can get switched on enough to cause problems for Brisbane's defence right from the start.
James was given specialist one-on-one coaching today, Cosmina working on one of his flaws.
He has a problem with his running off the ball. He tends to want the ball too much in the wrong areas for a striker anyway.
But on last week's performance, the team has little to worry about. Its 6-1 drubbing of West Adelaide has confidence sky high.
We could have a little chat tomorrow before the game. I'll see how the mood is, and if need to, I might have to bring the players back down to earth, but it's business as usual. 6-1, it's over and done with. We're going to get 6-1 tomorrow.
Meantime, the state's best squash players are in Newcastle for this weekend's return of the Newcastle Open. More than 160 competitors will play during the two-day tournament. It was last held 10 years ago. Also starting tomorrow, the 1996 Matara Surf Classic. Dixon Park will host the event in its 34th year. And in baseball, the Hunter Eagles hit off season 96 in Melbourne tonight with the opening round clash against the Monarchs. Jonathan Upton, NBN News.
Clem, Christopher, that's it. We're ready to go.
Lord Mayor Greg Hees has labelled the plan a change in philosophy for council. Under the plan, zoning for suburbs such as the Junction, Wickham, Hamilton and Broadmeadow will be altered to allow higher density housing to attract more residents. The strategy also includes zoning for light industrial close to residential. Councillor Hees says it's all about bringing about a sense of community.
You change the use at the back fence so that you have a street of residential, and then the next street along will be a street of light industrial. And you also have, a small shopping centre plus open space.
Council has identified Hamilton and its vibrant atmosphere as an example of what it wants to achieve with the plan. Councillor Hees believes the radical change in zoning policy is what is needed to keep inner city Newcastle sustainable.
And if we're going to have a city that is sustainable into the 21st century, that is a low-cost city, we need to promote development or redevelopment in the city along these lines.
Council will develop the plan further this week.
There was no shortage of smiles at Spears Point today as hundreds of children, all aged 6 and under, formed one big playgroup. More than 25 playgroups from the Lake Macquarie area took part in the event. It's hoped the day will raise awareness of the benefits of playgroups, both for children and their parents.
A playgroup is where parents, grandparents, carers can come along and join in with other families with children their same age. And it's a very cheap morning out, it's about 2 hours, and a lot of parents share their problems and their happiness and joy.
A playgroup is also a relatively cheap way to meet new friends.
So many families haven't got the money these days and they sit at home because they think there's nowhere to go. But I think playgroups are only $1, $2 for 2 hours a week.
The children meanwhile bounced their way from the Magic Castle to the Magic Show. One young boy had everything but his Batmobile, while others were a little too young to join in all the fun. Emma Ossian, NBN News.
"22-year-old Paul Latter has been juggling baseball and rugby league for years. It's for the latter he's made his mark in Lismore, a pacey back with Group 1 grand finalists Maris Brothers. But after try upon try for the Rams, football appears set to take a backseat to baseball. Contract negotiations with the Hunter Eagles are almost complete.
We're a little bit light on up the middle, and he's a guy with outstanding wheels. He can really run, and he's a good hitter and just a good all-round player, so we'll be happy to have his addition.
The Hunter Eagles aren't the first baseball team to woo the 22-year-old. 4 years ago, he had talks with the Atlanta Braves. Meantime, another arrival in Newcastle today, New York Mets boss Bobby Floyd. The Mets signed an affiliation with the Eagles earlier this month and were keen to check out their new home base. Floyd will scout for Australian talent during his 3-week visit and is also expected to play a key role in further affiliation agreements.
From what I've seen so far, it would be something very good to pursue.
And it's been training as usual for the squad after its disappointing start to the season. Thumped by the Melbourne Monarchs in the opening round, the Eagles have been building up their strength for next week's first home game against Perth. Jonathan Upton, NBN News.
The Walker Lagoon near Maitland was one of 3 areas in the Hunter placed on a high algal alert this week. The blue-green plant flourishing in still waters rich with nutrients.
It's an issue that's got to be worked through.
The Hunter Catchment Management Trust Forum in Branxton discussed ways of improving water quality in the region. Blue-green algae is one of the major problems causing concern to water users. Blue-green algae can cause skin irritation and nausea. It's also been known to kill livestock when swallowed. Mr Brennan says the blooms are fuelled by soil nutrients washed into the dams, and it's a problem all have to address.
The key to the whole thing, I think, is to recognise that everywhere we are is part of the catchment, and we finish up with a messy river if we have messy habits.
The Trust will launch a major algal awareness program next month. Vanessa Spark, NBN News.
Four Jacks has remained coy about the purchase of the floating dock, but today the state government announced the sale is about to be finalised. Neither party would specify a price, but the Hunter Port Corporation has welcomed the sale, whatever the cost.
But I think the company must have some confidence because they have exercised their right to purchase. They have obviously has some confidence in their own future and their commercial success. And I guess from the port's perspective, it's important to us to know that we can offer shipping companies a repair service.
The Trades Hall Council had called for the floating dock to go to tender, threatening to take any direct sale to the Independent Commission Against Corruption.
No, I'm not certain that's based on any fact and foundation. I'm sure that they probably aren't aware of the fact that this was something that the government really didn't have an option in.
Carrington-based minehunter builders ADI was also thought to be interested in the harbour's only ship repair service. But late today, the company rejected claims it had approached the government to buy the floating dock. Richard O'Leary, NBN News.
Gates are locked at Guninan's Broadmeadow plant this weekend and machinery is lying idle. Staff walked off the job for a stop work meeting at lunchtime yesterday and don't plan to return to work until next Wednesday. The cause of the industrial action is essentially a demarcation dispute. Unions angry that staff supervisors have been driving cranes. Guninan's management says the strike has come at a terrible time, with the company snowed under by heavy engineering orders. The manufacture of light rail vehicles for Hong Kong, however, won't be hindered. Unions agreeing to continue work where the company's overseas reputation could be affected. Workers are to meet again early Monday morning to consider their position, and a hearing is scheduled for the Federal Industrial Commission for the same afternoon. Laura Saperstein, NBN News. All roads led to Tyrrell's long flat paddock today, thousands upon thousands of weekenders and their wallets coming to the Hunter Valley to take in the atmosphere and spend up on wine.
With line-ups all the way down Broke Road, all the way back down through Colburn, so there's people coming from everywhere.
The mix of jazz culture and fine beverages has attracted roughly 10,000 people, 60% of them from Sydney. With their entry fee, wine purchases and accommodation costs tallied, the total benefit to the local community is expected to top $500,000. Organisers say this year is the biggest yet, as the Hunter Valley continues to grow as a tourist destination.
More and more and more. I mean, the market is barely untapped, so it's just everything's going to grow more and more. That's just tourism in general in this area.
But for most, the day had little to do with money and a great deal to do with grooving out on good jazz and gurgling a great drop of this stuff.
$12, $7 and $14, $11.60 and $3 even. The Quinella $51.60 and the Trifecta $1,676.90. The Waterford Crystal Mile was race 7. The winner started 14 to 1 with bookmakers, an even better price on the New South Wales TAB, $19.80 and $5.60, the Quinella $53.10 and the Trifecta $1,285.70. The Breakers may have been flogged 6-1 last week, but they were still raging favourites for the home clash against NSL cellar dwellers Perth. The first few minutes went just as planned for the home side, unlucky not to break through, but then after 28 minutes another scrappy piece of play in Perth's danger area finally presented Mark Wilson with an open shot at goal. 1-0, it was about the only highlight for the locals as the Breakers' defence cracked. Some fancy footwork from Strudwick and the visitors levelled. Before the goal scorer was again in the action, a huge throw-in caught the locals off guard and the Glory went to the break up 2-1. Newcastle failed to bounce back in what was an uninspiring second term. Most of the 4,000-strong crowd had given up with 5 minutes left, but not so Despotovski. He smashed in his second to cap off a glorious night for Perth, their first win in the NSL.
We're looking in excess of $2 million in direct expenditure, and a lot of those people who come here have already indicated they want to stay on for an extra week and look at holidays. So
Perth won its first match in the NSL on the weekend, beating Newcastle 3-1. But according to coach John Cosmina, the only things lacking for the locals were desperation and luck.
The personnel out there were probably the best available on the night. I was comfortable with the team that we selected. There was good balance in the side. And, you know, if we can go out and play like that again next week, we could win the game.
The side has an away double this week, a Friday night clash with Canberra and then on Sunday Wollongong. Some may see it as too big a commitment. Not so Cozzy. He thinks the trip will do wonders for morale.
We'll live as a full-time team for the weekend. And I think we'll play well Friday night, and I think we'll go out and play, having had another day together in camp, even better on the Sunday.
The team will leave on Thursday. Jonathan Upton, NBN News.
The flight of new Eagles addition Pee Wee Lopez is hot on the heels of fellow Met Preston Wilson's premature departure with a serious hand injury 2 weeks ago. Eagles management has been left with its feathers well and truly ruffled. Only 2 of the original 4 Mets recruits remain.
I suppose we've got to look on the fun side of it, otherwise I think we'd all kick round and start crying.
The losses have left the team down a catcher and 2 of its star hitters, and finding replacements has been no snack either. New outfielder Fletcher Bates, also from the New York Mets, was supposed to fly in today, but visa problems have held him up another week. Meanwhile, a hurried search is underway for a new catcher to join the nest.
Probably it may be a guy by the name of Martinez, who comes with very high raps. I talked to Pee Wee this morning at the airport about him, and he speaks very highly of him.
With the team in a shambles for at least another week, this weekend's game against the Perth Heat isn't looking promising. Eagles management can only hope no more of its players get the urge for flight.
If they could all give me their frequent flyer points, I think I'd be on a round-the-world trip to wherever and first class.
Laura Saperstein, NBN News.
Semi-final series composed of 5 teams, and that's where we want to be, in that top 5 for semi-finals. That's where any club should aim for, and we're no different. We want to be in that semi-final.